Shalom and welcome to another edition of Parasha Talk. I'm Rabbi Elliot Malamit from the Highland Park Conservative Temple Congregation Anshe Emet, but speaking to you today from Jerusalem, Israel. Joining me are my good friends, Rabbi Jeremy Kalmanowski, Anshe Chesed, speaking to us from New York City, Rabbi Barry J. Chesler, Solomon Schechter Day School of Long Island, speaking to us from Long Island. Exactly where on Long Island are you?
Now in Plainview,
Now in
You're
Plainview,
hiding
Long
in
Island.
plain view.
Nassau County.
You're hiding in plain view.
I am.
Exactly. So we are here. We're talking about Parshat Emor. Emor is a amazing parsha. It's an amazing part. All of our parshas are amazing. Uh, right in the heart of the book of Vayikra, we expect it to deal with Kohanim, which it does throughout most of the first part of the parsha. You know what? We're going to go easy on our numerous listeners and viewers, and we're going to talk about a part of the parsha that's a little more familiar to us because we do read these portions at the various festivals during the year. And we could describe chapter 23 in the book of Leviticus as a calendar. This is the calendar of the Kohanim. But I think a valuable way to approach this text would simply be to start, to read it, and to basically study it, like a chavruta would study it, okay? Chapter 23, verse 1, Vayedaber
I just want
Adonai.
to interject
Yeah,
one thing before we
go
begin,
ahead.
and that is that we read this parsha in the diaspora 3 times a year in addition to the weekly parsha. The first 2 days of Sukkot is from Emor, and the second day of Pesach. But in Israel, they only read it on the first day of Sukkot. And before the show, as you like to do, Ellie, you were talking about the narrative of the story, and it's an interesting thing to think about how our different Torah readings in Galut and Eretz Yisrael change the narrative that we're unfolding when we read the Torah.
I think that's a big topic, and especially it also, I think, would pertain to the Haftarot, because we always get the second day Haftarot. Our Israeli brothers and sisters miss all the wonderful readings. Look, they get a day less. We have one day more. It's a big controversial subject in contemporary Judaism about how we celebrate an extra day in the diaspora. I think the question as to whether or not that actually will be sustained will be one of the defining features of Judaism in the next coming decades. I'm not going to hold out any predictions, but there's tension over it. With the second day comes a second set of readings, and these have obviously different impacts on people. Um,
Wait, what did you say, Barry? It's the second day of Pesach
And the first 2 days of
and the
Sukkot.
first 2 days of Sukkot.
So there is no second day of
Right,
Pesach or second day of Sukkot. The other
right.
thing, you're talking about the Haftarot. So our Haftarah for the last day of Pesach, the eighth day, is the one that they use in Israel for Yom HaTzmaut. But
exactly.
they don't read it on the eighth day of Pesach because they don't have an eighth day of
They don't have
Pesach.
any
They don't
day of
have
And
so
it
Pesach.
changes the narrative. For us, it makes a very formidable link between Pesach Mitzrayim and the Geula of our day, which is the state of Israel, which is a little bit lost in Israel when you're not reading it again, but only for the first time, that beautiful Haftarah from Isaiah.
I
And
mean, I
well,
would I would
go
imagine
ahead.
that that astonish. I mean, it's one of the central passages in the Bible. The lion, the leopard lay down with the lamb, and the wolf and the
Isaiah.
kid. Yeah, Isaiah chapter 11. It's one of the most important passages in the whole, and lo yareh v'lo yashchitu b'chol har kodeshi. There will be no more violence and damage, and in even the animals of carnivorous animals will become vegetarian. I don't know whether that is supposed to mean like that the rules of
We are paused. Hang on.
Elliot froze. I mean, Jeremy
Jerry
froze.
froze. Hang on.
He looks pretty good, though.
What are we doing? Pause. You're good. We we
and we're
we we
back.
We're back. We were sorry for the disruption here. We had a technical glitch. We were talking about the different Haftarah. So you were mentioning Isaiah. Okay, so they don't get those beautiful words. I was going to add, by the way, that they also don't get the 8th chapter of the Book of Kings, which is the dedication of the temple on Shmini Atzeret. You
I
know,
heard a great senior sermon
I
about
know
that
you
once.
did. You know, we Israelis celebrate Shmini Atzeret Simchat Torah all in one, and they read Joshua 1, chapter 1, a continuation of from the end of Devarim. But we read chapter 8 of the Book of Kings, which is the dedication of the temple, Solomon's dedication. I have to say, this is a story that changed my life. So, you know what? Israelis are missing out on that. They're more focused on Joshua than they are on Solomon, and we could draw all sorts of theological conclusions from that altogether. But
Well, it is interesting that they have the conquest narrative and we have the established kingdom.
I think, you know what, we can make a whole doctoral thesis on that, but we're not. Okay, so let's start with chapter 23. Vayidaber Adonai el Moshe lemor, God spoke to Moses, Daber el bnei Yisrael v'amarta elem, speak to the children of Israel, say to them, Moadei Adonai. And we're going to have to translate Moadei Adonai. We know what Adonai is. Moadim, okay, we're going to finish the verse, Asher tikru otam, that you shall declare them or call MIKRA KODESH. We're going to translate what a MIKRA KODESH is, Ele Moadai. So these two terms, Moadim, Moadei Adonai, and MIKRA KODESH. Let's try and translate them, or let's try and explain them. We'll offer the first one, Moadim, Moed. We have the word Moed in the phrase Ohel Moed, the tent of, we usually translate it as tent of meeting. So a Moed is a place where there is meeting going on, or appointment. This is the appointed place.
Right.
That is to say, the place is the appointed place. The Mishkan is the appointed place, and this would be the appointed time. And so what we have here is this is interesting. In Judaism, in the Torah, we have places where you meet God and times where you meet God.
Right,
Discuss.
and they're regular. In other words, these are not by happenstance. So Jacob Neusner, in his translation of the Mishnah, translates Seder Moed, the second Seder, as appointed times. So the Ohel Moed is where you meet God at a specific time.
We can think of a few other words that are like this. An Edah is an assembly of people.
I thought it's a group of campers.
It is a group of campers, but God says to Moshe, "V'no adti lecha sham," I will meet you in the tabernacle, mi ben hakruvim, between the two cherubs. That's where you and I are going to encounter each other. So they are set times, but they are set times for encounter, which seems to me very, very significant. Like whether we were talking before we before we started recording about the Renaissance Italian commentator Saforno says that they are Mikra Kodesh, they are Asefot Ha'am, they're gatherings of the people, Mikra Kodesh, for sacred purpose. The people are called together, they're called to assemble. I guess that this is probably also the etymological source of the word Vad, a council or a commission or some sort of committee, because the people are gathered together. Beit Vad, the Pirkei Avot says, make your house Beit Vad l'chachamim, a place where scholars can meet. So I think that it's all associated with human gathering for sacred purpose.
But what I would add is, if we read the verse closely, it seems to suggest that from God's view, these are Moadim, and from the people's view, it's Mikra Kodesh, and we might understand Mikra Kodesh as a proclamation of holiness, which is perhaps what the biblical understanding of the holidays is.
Sacred proclamations. So there's a sense here that you want to picture the people coming together in a convocation. We have this day. The word sacred convocation is part of the Sim Shalom Yizkor service, right? This day in sacred convocation, fathers, their parents recall their children, children recall their parents, and da 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 da. And the words sacred convocation is a deliberate translation. Rabbi Jules Haro, Zichron Livracha, he probably translated it. It was a deliberate translation of MIKRA KODESH, right? Sacred, okay? But go back to this idea for a second that you have appointed places and appointed times, that is, or places of appointment and times of appointment. And maybe this is giving us a theology of the festivals, that the festivals are about meeting God, right? You meet God at a place when you have to bring your normal sacrifices of atonement and your zevach shlamim, your peace offerings and your gratitude offerings and your guilt offerings and all that, and you bring, in your life as a biblical Israelite, you're going to go to the sacred place, for the place of appointment to deliver your sacrifice and to have your meeting. But in the normal life of a biblical Israelite, there are going to be different times of the year that are special. They have exalted purposes to them.
There's a wonderful Rashi on the very first verse in Sefer Vayikra, where he distinguishes Vayikra from Vayikar, that God talks to Moses at set times and to the prophets of the nations at his
accidental.
will. Right. And so I wonder if this understanding that we're suggesting for the holidays as fixed times really belongs to the temple phase of the religion, whereas in the Mishkan phase of the religion, God was not as fixed. And he came, what we would say, by happenstance. That would be the human point of view. In other words, God was not there necessarily when we wanted him to be there. You remember the great scene at the burning bush. That was probably the last thing that Moses expected, was to have an encounter with God while he's out chasing a sheep.
Mm-hmm.
I just on a level of my own religious experience, I think it was a great comment, and I'm not sure which I like better. I mean, of course, I like the discipline and regularity of a Jewish calendar. I think that's a major part of this religion, and I appreciate that. Some Tuesday in February is not the first day of Pesach. It's not the first day of Shavuot. Those are special times, and I would kind of like the possibility that I can be out chasing a sheep and come across a total wonder and have my eyes open to it. So a little bit of happenstance, the ability to be surprised, I guess is the way I would say this, is a pretty important part of religion.
Right.
I want to
that's
just,
how
yeah.
Abraham Joshua Heschel understood it.
I
You have to be open to radical amazement.
I don't want to. It's not a pushback, but I want to just kind of reframe this, which is that the whole notion that you have a calendar, I think is crucial. I mean, all religions do have a calendar. They all have their appointed season. They all have their appointed festivals. We get that, okay? But we as Jews operate on several calendars at the same time. I'm just thinking as you're speaking. We're in the middle of the year. We just passed Pesach. We're in the counting of the Omer. That
27th day.
I'm a little ahead of you.
You're on Koach. I'm on
exactly. So
Ah,
but this is a perfect illustration, and of course
we're pure, he's strong.
the counting of the Omer is included in chapter 23 of Leviticus, and the notion that we pay special attention to days, to counting days, to groups of days, to the calendar, that there's a set calendar, and that a calendar governs us to the extent that we live, as Jews today, defined in multiple calendars. We have the secular calendar, of the Jewish calendar. I was going to say every year, by this time, we're already looking at the next year's calendar, and one of the big features in congregational life is, a shul. Either sends out a calendar. We send out a calendar every year. It's sponsored by our funeral home. They print up. These are.
It's good for business.
It's good for business. They print up a bunch of calendars. They're produced by some printer in Israel, and they have beautiful pictures. But one of the great joys is getting your next year's calendar, and they've become very popular. The Jewish Museum has a beautiful calendar, and I don't know. I don't know if they still publish it. The Carben, they're not Carben anymore. They're owned by some other. But the big, huge desk calendar, where you could nobody uses. Actually, some people use paper. Still.
Nobody uses paper.
I use a number of calendars. I love calendars. And it's a favorite theme because you're constantly thinking about how you organize time. One of the most interesting books that I have come across in the last few years is a book published by Yad Vashem on how Jews kept time during the Holocaust, and that it was an act of spiritual resistance to keep calendars in the ghetto. They were forbidden from keeping calendars, and they had clandestine calendars, and they were, quite, learned and pious Jews who kept the calendar. And, to this day, we are, we're asked, what's this week's parsha? Well, of course we have the Parasha Talk, so it's Emor. I'll be asked on a regular basis, what's candlelighting time? When does Shabbos end? And our services, our times for services, these depend on sunrise, sunset. So we are
and when a holiday approaches, and we begin to get the phone calls in advance of synagogue service, people need to know what time is Yizkor.
What time is Yizkor?
How that bothers me so much.
We also get what's at the Kiddush.
Well, that's an important question.
Well, it is a very important question. Is it a big Kiddush, little Kiddush? We have to know. We have to plan lunch. Okay, this is what congregational life is about, but it is about the regular rhythm of time. And
right. So I would add two things here. First of all, we sometimes forget that the Torah has several different calendars, and they're not all the same. The earliest calendar in Sefer Shemot was linked to the agricultural season, and it seems from the text in both Shemot Kaf Gimel and Lamed Daled 23 and 34 that it was linked to the specific farmer. When he harvested his barley or wheat around Shavuot, and the main harvest would have his holiday when he did the harvest. And if the neighbor was a few days later, a few days earlier, he would do it at his time too. And what we have here in Vayikra is a very fixed calendar because all the holidays are assigned a specific date in a certain month. And that's something new. The other thing I would say, you were talking about candlelighting times. It took me the longest time to realize that the sun sets on, say, April 29th at the same time every year. It looks different on our calendar because the dates are always a day off or 2 days off in a leap year. So the times look different, but the actual regularity is embedded in the universe.
So there's an online calendar that I go to. It's called myzmanim.com.
That's
that
great.
calendar?
Yeah.
And they have, a whole list of halachic times, every day. What's the earliest time you can put a talis and tefillin? What's the earliest mincha, etc., etc. These are very important things. If you are attentive to the astronomical phenomena of sunrise, sunset, and that was how you tell time. We do live our lives by these these signs, and in some ways, because we live on different clocks and we live in different calendars, we're constantly having to navigate between the way our clocks tell time and the way we can tell time by looking outside, and how you structured your day based on hours of sunlight divided by 12 segments for the hours, and these were astronomical hours or halachic hours. These are complicated things. It gets, the most complicated day for the Jewish calendar is the day before Pesach, right? Every year I have to publish this calendar, of special times. So there's a time for, when's the last time the last moment you could possibly eat chametz, and the last moment you can destroy it. These are really, really, and then there's of course the first moment you can eat chametz after Pesach, right? These are only second to when is the break fast? When do you break fast on Yom Kippur? After Yom Kippur. These are crucial things, and of course there's a debate about all of these things in different sources. Some authorities have much more stringent times. They have later.
Well, you mentioned Maizmanim, which has you can go by the Magen Avraham or the Vilna Gaon or somebody else.
Do you want to just explain that for a second, okay? Because I don't, the halachic arguments are not are opaque to me, but these are different personalities who are different.
Different religious authorities because we can't even conceive of this because we say things like Shabbat begins at 6:14, but that is to have that level of precision about time is an entirely modern phenomenon. They didn't have things like that, and so they said, that it's related to Alot HaShachar or Hanetzach Hama, the beginning of dawn when the sky is just turning light, or when the sun peaks over the horizon, and when the sun goes down. Is it when the sun begins to hit the horizon, when the sun completely hits the horizon, or is it when it's all the way dark? So you have different ways of calculating those 12 variable hours. And if I'm not mistaken, by the way, I think the Tosafot not only end Shabbat very late, they will start Shabbat what we would consider rather quite late as well. And so some of these figures will say, well, you have to stop eating chametz at the beginning of the fourth hour, and you have to destroy it by the beginning of the fifth hour. So, but how do you calculate that? So, as you take those halachic ideas, which are pretty much analog, and you attach them to our modern digital system, you get crazy stuff like you have to stop eating chametz at 10:13 and destroy it by 11:22. But the Vilna Gaon didn't have a watch that said things like 11:20.
Well, he might have had a watch because he was certainly late enough, but not the earlier authorities. But it's striking because in some ways the rabbis anticipated modern physics because the definition of time with respect to Shabbat was how long it took you to walk a certain distance. And that's part of the theory of relativity is the close connection between time and distance. We use a light year, which is both a time and a distance.
Interesting. Okay, so looking at both appointed times and places of appointment, it shouldn't surprise us then that the first appointed time and the most important appointed time is Shabbat. That's Sheshet Yamim Taseh Malacha. 6 days you shall work. V'yom Hashvi Shabbat Shabbaton. The seventh day is Shabbat Shabbaton, Sabbath of Sabbath, or Shabbat, the intense Sabbath, Mikra Kodesh. It is a sacred convocation. Kol Malacha Lo Tasu. You are not allowed to do any work. Shabbat Hi Ladonai. It is a Shabbat for God. B'chol moshotechem, in every place of your habitation. And here, we've spoken about this in the past, and it calls for amplification and reiteration. Shabbat is the central and most important holiday, festival, appointed time, Mikra Kodesh, Moed, that we have. And isn't it interesting that the our Jewish lives are punctuated by this? I don't think any of us, and I'm not only talking about the three of us, but as Jews connected to any Jew connected in the rhythm of Jewish life, we are all Shabbat Jews, and it shouldn't surprise us that the Book of Leviticus puts this right in front as the first Moed, as the first Mikra Kodesh.
So it doesn't really fit in though, because Shabbat is an anomaly. It's the only sacred day that's not based on an astronomical phenomenon. Right, a month is the lunar cycle. A solar year is the Earth around the sun. But the 7 days of a week is completely artificial, except it seems to be almost universal among human beings.
So that's very interesting.
Is that true? Are there other cultures that don't have a 7-day week?
Well, I don't know about that so much, but the French tried to use a 10-day week during the Revolution,
Yeah.
which didn't work out
No,
so
but
well.
this is
And
this is
as
a,
it
this
turns
is
out, the revolution didn't work out so well either.
but that is a that's a great observation. Like, a month is it's not a mere human convention. There's something that it corresponds to, the moon and the month, as that clearly goes, and then the seasons of the year. But it's a great observation that Shabbat is a cultural. It's not that there's a 7 day rhythm uh, of you know time to a week. It's we impose. I mean, the Rabbanu Shalom rested on the seventh day, so that's why we have the seventh day. But it is kind of arbitrary.
You know what? There is a rhythm. Obviously, we all live in a rhythm of 7 days, and it's impossible for us to conceive of any other rhythm. That experiment that the French did of a decennial or what would be the word, a 10-day week, which has the prefix DEC, right? but but that it failed because the human body, the human being has there's something deeply built into us about 7 days. I don't know. It seems almost arbitrary to say that. Um,
Well,
anyway,
it's just so thoroughly structures our life. And I mean, it's perhaps not totally uh, arbitrary insofar as the 28 and a little bit day lunar cycle is easily broken up into 4 7 day chunks. Uh,
mhm.
so that kind of works. I mean, and the holidays themselves. I mean, we know this. Most things in Judaism, we if we can say such a thing, try to peer like archaeologists into the development of religion. Most of these holidays are fundamentally related to something agricultural or astronomical. They are summer solstice. They are autumnal equinox. They are vernal equinox. They are winter solstice. They are agricultural. Pesach is the early spring barley harvest. Shavuot is the late spring, early summer wheat harvest. Sukkot is all the other harvests. Chanukah, even of all things, the late Chanukah. What, like it's a coincidence that it happens to fall at the winter solstice? No, it's the darkest night of the year. It's the Tikufat Tevet, which is how you say winter solstice in Hebrew. The month, the Rosh Chodesh of Tevet. It's the longest night of the year. It's the darkest night of the year because the moon is in full wane or just about to begin the new wax. And so what is our practice? Our practice is to fill the cold, dark night with ever increasing amounts of light in our menorot. And yeah, you know that is it's just perfectly obvious that the uh, core experience of Hanukkah, even let alone the other ones with the harvests, is tied to some external phenomenon which we mark. Now, what's interesting is that the holidays then acquire. Then, I mean, the Bible gives us, and we talk about. It's Yetziat Mitzrayim. It's leaving Egypt. It's receiving the Torah. It's all the other things that are associated, but it seems like they're built on a tashtet, a foundation of something agricultural. And it's tremendously interesting and bizarre and crazy that in Parshat Emor, the holiday that is remembering the Egypt is Sukkot. Pesach is described purely as agricultural, and Sukkot, I want you to dwell in booths because Kibas Sukkot hoshavti et bnei Israel v'hotzii otam meretz Mitzrayim. I had you dwell in booths when I took you out of Egypt. So the experience of Sukkot of all things is remembrance of Yetziat Mitzrayim
Right.
here in this parsha.
So the
So,
other thing to point out here is the transformation of the holidays to mark historical events that took place before Bnei Israel entered the land. And so,
mhm.
in a sense, what were originally, I think, Canaanite agricultural holidays become moments that we take with us in our new land that harken back to our experience before we even got to the land, suggesting that there might be some kind of connection between the past and the present that in our modern day we might sometimes overlook.
So we're coming to the end. I just want to maybe close with a couple of thoughts here. We have the notion of meeting, and we have the appointed times that one of the central actions that is taking place is that God is relational. God is meeting the people at specific times, and God is meeting the people at specific times with specific either moments in the agricultural cycle, and of course moments that are recalling the historical narrative of the people, and that each one of these holidays is in fact telling a different story. And we recite the holiday cycle as telling the story of the Jewish people, namely Pesach, the birth of the Jewish people, Shavuot, the revelation of Torah at Sinai, Sukkot as the experience of the wandering, and that there is a typical act of reenactment in each of these holidays. And so I'm looking for metaphor. I'm thinking of the idea that the holidays represent moments of reenactment. But I'm trying to think about different metaphors for the holidays. I'm thinking about, you go to the Met Museum, the Metropolitan Museum in Manhattan, okay? Big museum, or any great museum. And there are different wings in the museum. And you can go into the modern art wing, or you can go into the Renaissance art, or whatever it is that is. And you get a certain story or a certain set of themes, a certain way that reality is being presented to you. And I have this feeling that when we go through the cycle of the holidays, we are going into different rooms, and we're being told, and we are encountering specific things. Look, we're a month away from Pesach. It's going to be Pesach Sheni at some point, and I'm still reminding myself of the great fervor in preparing for Pesach, and which is food, and which is story, and which is Seder, and which is all the things that are tied to that. Shavuot doesn't really get that much attention. It ought to, I think, and we've talked about this in the past. But what do you think of metaphors, and what do you think of these two metaphors of reenactment, of a stage, of theater, and what do you think of going into different rooms in the museum?
Well, what we could say about Shavuot is kind of like the constitutional convention of the Jewish people.
Nice.
But I was very struck by your idea of the birth of the people at Pesach.
Yeah.
Springtime connotes birth and the unfolding green. And, we get our constitution on Shavuot. And I think that, the line in Emor about God's sheltering presence, embracing the people in the wilderness is quite powerful, because we're all looking for that Tachat Kanfei Shechina experience, and perhaps Sukkot is the holiday designed to give it to us.
Nice. How about Kovanovsky?
I like the rooms in the museum. What I said before about the willingness to be surprised. If you think that such and such is the holy day, that's what we say in Judaism, that this is Kodesh and that's Chol. This is special and sacred, and this is ordinary. So religiously speaking, I want the system of Kedusha to spread forth and to ultimately absorb the Chol, such that, as Rav Kook said, Hayashan Yitchadesh what do you say? The old will become new, and the new will become Hayashan Yitchadesh ve'achadash Yitkadesh, and it'll get sanctified. That said, I feel like the structure, the skeleton of Jewish time that is the holidays is like the skeleton on which the entire human being hangs. The flesh hangs off of this calendrical, rhythmic pattern that keeps us together. And that's how I feel totally, by the way, about
I love that,
Parshiot.
Because the skeleton then becomes revivified with each holiday.
Yeah.
And speaking of Haftarot, Shabbat Chol HaMoed Pesach is the dry bones of Ezekiel.
Right. That's right. Well, there's a lot to talk about with these holidays, and if we go back to these foundational elements, there's God and there's the people, and give me a good Heschel line here, good line about monuments in time, and that we make our pilgrimages in not in space but in time. And I think he was very attentive to that idea. That
So I think the main idea that I've been thinking about lately is that the idea of Shabbat being the palace in time, and sometimes we forget what the purpose of the palace is, and that's the place where we live. And
yeah,
so it's an attempt to meld the world of space and the world of time by suggesting that we truly live in time, independent of the space, perhaps, that we embrace at that moment.
I mean, that's beautiful. All right. Well, our time is now reaching its conclusion, and
And to our friend Elliot Malamet, we have to say, what is it? It's
it's a
1:15
lot
in
in the
the
morning. It's 7 hours later than
it's
you.
1:15 in the morning.
That's all right. That's okay.
A real trooper.
I'm perfectly
Leslie
awake now.
Sean,
You
Leslie
know,
Sean, go to sleep.
it's Torah. Torah keeps you awake, sustains you, right? I'm just very grateful for my colleagues, Rabbi Barry Chesser, Rabbi Jeremy Kalmanovsky, and I'm grateful to our numerous viewers and listeners. They write in, they say things. I got some beautiful comments. Danny Kaloff, thank you.
So Elliot, tomorrow morning, after you've had a nice good sleep, you wake up, and I know you're not that far from Machane Yehuda. Go to Machane Yehuda and get like fresh burekas.
Oh man, yeah.
It's
That is
great.
great. All right. Be well, everyone. We'll see you next week on the next edition of Parsha Talk. Bye bye.
Shabbat shalom.